This has been the Atari 8-bit podcast.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. In the mid-1980s, Mike Sandau and his friend connected their Atari 8-bit computers to their Citizens Band radios to create a small radio-telephone computer network. Their DIALOG project combined their radio hardware with custom software, first in Atari BASIC, then later in Action, to allow chatting, broadcasting messages, and binary file transfers over the air. Mike has uploaded the software, source code, and screenshots to the Internet Archive and placed it all in the public domain. There's a link to that in the show notes at ataripodcast.com. This interview took place on April 26, 2018.
My first machine was the Atari 2600, which was the very beginning. So it was just gaming. Later on, moved on to a TI 994A. That's where it really started with programming. So it did this for a couple of months or maybe years. That's all. By the way, I'm a little bit late starter. So my period when I started computing was then already in 82 to 86. So this is where the Atari years were, and later on it went to PC. So I didn't get the Atari hype from the very beginning, like I think you did, and a lot of other people I heard in your interviews. So a little bit late starter to we call it like that, and then I had TI was very limited, so I switched to an Apple IIc, which came out right in this year. I think it was 84.
Yes, it did.
But was not happy with this machine. It hadn't enough colors and so on. And then I was really, a friend of mine had an Atari 800. So I was really amazed by the capabilities of this machine. So I had to have one too. And that's up to date my most favorite 8-bit machine. That's the start, and then after playing games with the Atari, I had an XL. I went to programming a lot, and that's where this project started. So I tried to combine two hobbies I had, so CB radio and computer, and was quite okay. Yeah.
Now, I am familiar with. Just for some context, I'm familiar with CB radio in the United States, which was a huge fad in the mid to late 70s, and everyone had them in the cars and that sort of thing. And was it that a big thing in the 70s and 80s in Germany?
It was, probably exactly the same time. So at the end of the 80s, it faded away. So wasn't that popular anymore. But also the 70s, 80s, absolutely.
Okay.
Must have been already the same time.
So were you
US.
Were you using CB radio just to talk with buddies, or how were you using it before you got into the computer?
It was a former Facebook, So we had our CB radio, where we had contact friends. It was fun. You could be outside and in the car. Telephone is not always available, and
All right. Were you into ham radio at all, or strictly CB?
Strictly CB. I thought about it, but then I didn't have the power to get into this so technical details. This came later than when I studied. I studied communication engineering later, And this maybe is also to do with the project we did on the CB radio, because I was really impressed with what you can do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, so where did this idea of hooking your Atari to the CB, where did that idea come from?
Well, it started when we had a conversation with my friend, and he also had a computer and acoustic coupler, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I simply had the idea to hold the microphone to the tone the acoustic coupler is giving, and he held his acoustic coupler to his CB radio and could read the keys I have typed. That was that simple, you know. So it was really the idea to start a project with that. So because you didn't even have to do some wiring or soldering. It was just so simple to couple it acoustically like a telephone. And that's where the project was started.
All right. So it was you and 3 friends, you said?
Yeah, basically it was me and my best friend at that time. So that's why the project was called DIALOG. It's for 2 people. But some other guys friends were involved in programming, giving some aid in programming and electronics. Mm-hmm. Because at this time I really had my start in electronics and programming and such complex things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it started off. It sounded like we're just with kind of a test to send the acoustic modem noises over the radio, and that worked. And then it grew into more. So tell me into what it grew into.
Yeah, the idea was great. We liked it, and so we thought about doing it more comfortable and setting up a mailbox or something like that. You know, back then the fees for telecommunication telephone were also quite high. So yeah, sending data for a long time was not so cheap. But yeah, so yeah. First of all, there had to be a program that could read and write the messages. Then, of course, we needed a permanent connection from the radio to the acoustic coupler, and yeah, I used the receiver, and that was normally from a telephone, but I connected it to the CB radio, and this receiver then was plugged in the acoustic coupler, and so the connection was done. Then we had to control the push to talk, that's what we call in CB, send and receive button of the radio. Mm-hmm. And we used on the CO part of the Atari, there is one signal that's used to control the cassette motor on and off. So if you use the 1010 cassette drive, you can turn the motor on and off with the signal. As we didn't use the cassette, we took this signal and put a transistor and a relay to it, and then could switch between send and receive from the CB radio, automatically controlled by a computer. And this was for me very fascinating at this time to use just a simple peek and poke commands and some transistors and resistors and relay, and then you have control with your machine. You have control over another machine. So this was at this time it was a breakthrough for me. Yeah. So that was the hardware basically. Then we had I had to go forward with programming, so we did it in Atari BASIC, which was quite okay. Did several modes, for example, leaving some messages or to a chat mode. So the one could write a sentence, the other one could reply. So basically the same things we have on the internet today. Some mailbox function. So all these things, these ideas are very old, and I programmed them in Atari BASIC. When the final thing we did was that we could transfer binary data. For example, I could send my friend the latest version of the DIALOG program by night to his home. So we did some kind of software update with the software as well. So that was quite nice, yeah.
Now I know your baud rate's going to be limited by the radio bandwidth. So what kind of BPS did you end up getting over CB radio?
Yeah, that was also an interesting point, because when the system was set up, I like to play around it and do some experimental settings and so on. And you could really do this because the driver back then was in machine language, and you could change the settings of the driver. So you could also go away from the standard baud rates like 300, 600, 1200. So you could experiment. So basically, the default baud rate we were using was 600 baud. That was what was okay with the acoustic coupler. And but I tried, and we could raise the baud rate to 850. That's what I've seen in my software I've written back then. So today I wouldn't know it anymore, but I've seen it, and so it was quite a lot more, but still very slow. Okay, if you compare to today's standards. So, but yeah, it was interesting to get a little more out of the system by just changing some default values. Of course, if we did it, nobody else could read the communication anymore, because it was a baud rate that normally didn't exist. So it was also some secret mode to put it up.
Do you think there were a lot of other Atari users with this setup who were secretly spying on your communications?
Yes, I tried to. I tried to get in contact with others and try to motivate others to take part, to communicate, to join in our system. Back then I was living near to Stuttgart. It was on a very exposed. I was living on an exposed location. So I had a big antenna, and I think it was 10 meters large. So my CB radio signal was at least, I think, 20 miles. And from time to time we did some broadcasting mode where we periodically sent some invitation for the other CP and computer guys to join in to our network. Later on, I was talking with other CP users, and then it turned out that some of them had also the idea to put their acoustic coupler to the loudspeaker, and they could read our broadcast, but it didn't work out the way that everybody was happy with it and joined in. So it was just the two of us who did it.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So,
all right. So you had a chat mode, you had message sending, you had broadcasting, you had binary file transfer, and you said also you had a blinking LED if there was a message waiting for you?
Yeah, exactly, like answering machine. So if you come home, you can see and it was really that simple, because the Atari had so good possibilities to, I think we did it with the joystick port, and this chip was also able to to output, give some output. You could switch it from input to output mode, and then just connect a LED, and that's it. So it was really a good machine. So that's why I liked it. It was although it was a closed system, could do a lot of things with it without needing any expansion cards or something like that. So I think up to date, I think this machine is very unique and has astonishing architecture and lots of possibilities. And so they're my favorite.
Yeah, mine too. Cool. So how long would you say you and your buddy had this system running?
We were doing this for about a year. Quite regularly, and I think, as we've done this file transfer thing, we were really the end of the possibilities what can be done with such a system. So the interesting thing was, of course, setting up the system, improving it, and find out how far it will get. Then the interest faded a little bit. But some years later, some companies came out and sold some products which you can buy and then do the same thing we did. And I think up to date it's still used. I think on CB band. I don't know how it's in America and US. There are some channels that are reserved for data transfer. So back then it was only for amateur RTTUI, I think it's called, mode, and that's, of course, that was also the idea we got from professionals, and would like to do it also for CB radio. And as it turned out, nowadays it's also standard, so you can do it if you want, and transfer data over CB radio. Of course, in times of internet, that's not interesting anymore. Back then it was quite nice, yeah. So after that was finished, I discovered Action as a programming language, which I also like very, very, very much. And refactored the program and wrote it in Action because Atari BASIC is quite good, but it was sometimes too slow, which is maybe I can tell a funny story for that. So not everybody was happy that we were transferring data because they had the beep tones and the noise on the channel. But I think we had 40 channels here in Germany, so it was not really that problem to find a free channel. Yeah. So, but some guys just want to bully around a little bit, I think. So there was one guy. He heard signals we were transferring, and then he was talking into the communication. And the funny thing was that with his voice he would fill up the receive buffer of the Atari lot. So, and with the BASIC was not fast enough to read out the buffer. It's very fast. So it took a long time until the BASIC program read out the garbage data the voice had put into the buffer, and so it took some time, and then so there was a delay, and then the next transmission was started, and I think the other guy on the other side thought that the machine would try to read what he said, or what, I don't know, or would be scared of what he said, and then make a pause before it would go on. So it was a quite funny story about human-machine interaction, some kind of to understand what he didn't understand what the system was about. But, it's a funny story. So,
So you said that you went into your parents' attic or something, and you found your old equipment. And tell me about that.
Sure. Yeah, I like my old equipment, and first the idea was that I keep my old stuff, which I had since I was a teenager. So I'm a little bit nostalgic about this, and want to keep it. I keep it up to date. First of all, it was thought to be a long-time conservation project to find out how long the diskettes would work, would be readable, how long the EEPROM would work, and how good the Atari hardware would sustain the decades, which turned out very, very good. So I think I must agree Atari is basically indestructible. That's true. So that's what I'm doing up to date. So from time to time I go to the attic and get down the machine and play some old games. See how my 1050 disk drive is doing. It's doing quite good up to date. So really is very good hardware. It's very, if you compare it with things you can buy today, you throw them away after some years, and this stuff still works perfectly if you keep it a little bit in good shape and treat it quite nice. So also most of my diskettes are still readable. I also have an Atari ST. I don't have the same experience here with the ST regarding diskettes, because I think 90% of the diskettes I kept as a long time project. They are destroyed. They cannot be read anymore. So the plastic went off the disk. So you can see that really the material is breaking down. And compared to the 5.25 floppies, they are mostly in good shape. So I think 70% of them are still working. So, so that's also some interesting difference I wanted to find out. And the hardware is still perfect. So
nice. So have you managed to get I would love to see. I know you put on archive.org a couple of screenshots of your software running. Have you managed to move the software to get the software off those floppy disks and onto something more modern?
Well, yeah, I do run emulators. Mm-hmm. So recently I'm a complete nerd now, but I got my first Raspberry Pi. Did it for a small project. We've done this winter, and then I've seen that there are a lot of retro machine emulators for this machine, and then that's why with this re-triggered the whole Atari the Atari hype had back then. So I was installing the emulator and ran my old software and reading conversations that were 30 years old or even elder. So it was a really flashback in time, which was great. This spent a lot of time here with retro Atari 8-bit on the emulator too, and still, but I want not only to do emulator, so I want to keep up, if it's possible, to keep my old hardware as good as possible. So that's why I also, for example, I still have here in the corner is an old Atari 800 XL is damaged, so I will try to fix him. So that's a hobby. Mm-hmm. So I do a little bit electronics and soldering and find out what's wrong with it. I keep my hardware, and from from time to time, I play with the old games. So
nice.
I play Atari today,
Mm-hmm.
Recently, I finished playing 7 Cities of Gold. So
Okay.
I discovered 100% of the new worlds, and I started this in the 80s. So I still have the save files from the 80s that was not finished. And this year I finished this. So yeah, why not? So it's still working and still a great game. So and I have a daughter is 8-year-old, and then she sees that and she asks me what I'm doing there, because I also have PS4. But I think it's also great to show it to your kids for several reasons. And also she gets interested in this whole things. Not most of them she finds awful of the bad graphics, she says, and then say, yeah, man, this is the basics of this was the start of video games. So you have to keep that in mind. And she's shown her some games that she really she really likes to play on these old machines. Very few ones, but some of them she likes. So, and I think that's great if you have such different, it's a complete different user universe if you compare it with modern machines. But I think the basic idea of a good game is that it's not supposed to have great graphics, but a good idea of the game, and that's fun to play. And you can achieve this with limited hardware and graphics and sound as well, if you have a good idea. So, and that's why I try to show her, and sometimes it works. So.
Mm-hmm. Good. What do you do today for work?
Well, yeah, I'm an engineer. I'm working in a big company, so among the market leaders for industrial automation systems. So we make PLCs, automation systems, software to operate these PLCs. And that's what I work here. And right now I'm working on test automation. So we are testing our software by writing other programs that test our main programs, if you understand. So it's also quite fascinating thing. And yeah, it's running smooth, yeah.
Good. If you could send a message to the other Atari computer users that are still out there, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would tell them if you still have an Atari or even maybe an emulator, try it from time to time. Show it to your kids, and maybe have a look at the history of the Atari company, because I think the history of the Atari company is unique and also as fascinating as the products they made. And I think if you study the rise and fall of Atari, it can give you a lesson for life. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's my message. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are 2 ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/Savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.